Week 2 of the November Internationals gives us a full fixture list. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. So this weekend, as I said, is the second week of these November internationals, but it's actually the first week of the official window. That's why we didn't have a full fixture list last week, but we've got all six of the Six Nations teams hosting. I was going to say Southern Hemisphere opposition. I suppose to some people they are all Southern Hemisphere opposition, but as someone who's lived in Japan for a very long time, you know, I it, it it kills me to say that Japan is in the Southern Hemisphere when I know that they're basically like you draw a line around the globe from Italy and you're going to intersect Japan. So it's kind of weird that we think of them as a Southern Hemisphere team, but I guess they're involved in their competitions. But then does that make South Africa a Northern Hemisphere team? Like that's another question to be answered as well. Then in that case, but yeah, um, for the most part at least, it is North versus South this weekend. So what we're going to do as usual is go down through the fixtures. I'll give you a little bit about what I think, a little bit of history for the fixtures as well. Um, and I'll try not to prattle on too long, but I always prattle on too long. But as I say, the people who don't like my kind of content have already clicked away, so I'm fine with that. I'm here to fill a niche. I feel is there in terms of rugby that people. Not everybody wants TikTok style videos that give you everything, like tell you all the important stuff right at the start, and then are done. Like some people like a little bit more layers on things and stuff like that. So I think I can do that to at least some degree, and hopefully those of you who do enjoy it stick with me. So the first game of the weekend is Ireland versus Japan. So obviously a fixture close to my heart, given as I said, that I lived in Japan a long time. My wife was Japanese. Obviously, I want Ireland to win, but at the same time, I kind of feel sad with how Japan are doing at the moment. And for me, Eddie Jones going back there was not a good move for Japan, but I think he may be just a bit of a stopgap until they get the next coach that's going to bring them forward again. But they like he's obviously very well respected in Japan and much liked over there as well. So, um, but yeah, this one Ireland versus Japan, in the Aviva Stadium. Kickoff is 12:40. That's Irish time, so check your local time to see when that is. And this is kind of an interesting one. Japan famously beat Ireland in the pool stages in the 2019 World Cup in Japan. I remember living in Japan at the time, and it really was like a seismic result. Like nobody was expecting, no Japanese person was expecting Japan to beat Ireland. They thought they had a decent chance of beating Scotland, which they also did in that World Cup. They didn't think that they'd beat Ireland, so it was absolutely amazing for them. Obviously for me, not so much. Ireland about a year out or around actually November time, right before the World Cup, they were number one in the world and looking like maybe they'll get over the quarterfinal for once, and then they just fell off a cliff going into that World Cup. Like got absolutely destroyed in looked shaky in the Six Nations, got destroyed in the warm ups, and then couldn't pick it back up in the World Cup itself either. Even though they did make the quarterfinals, but they basically stumbled into the quarterfinals, and there was no surprise when they got knocked out in the end. But yeah, Japan not at that level that they were back then. Ireland, even though they have gone down a little, in the last year or so, there's definite decline in Ireland. Wherever about people are saying, oh, they're undercooked and wherever for the All Blacks. Um, but still, you know, you have to look at kind of the last year or so. You know, last November wasn't great. Six Nations wasn't brilliant either. And now, you know, the start of this November as well isn't brilliant. So it can't always just be just a localized recent thing. You know, if you have that long, I'm not including the summer tour because one, the opposition, and two, the personnel there, because most of them were away with the Lions. And yet I understand that players away with the Lions, and they, you know, didn't have much game time, etc. But you know, the RFU have more say, you know, over their players than pretty much any other union, and they do look after the players really well. But if they wanted the players to not be undercooked for this, you know, this window, then why didn't they decide, let's even give them, like, especially the Leinster players, make sure those players have an extra game. You know, you could have played them, like a lot of them, against the Sharks, or they obviously weren't going to send them um, off to South Africa, like, because they never send the big, which I don't agree with, but they never send like the kind of the front, a lot of frontline players down there. But why not played more of them against the Sharks? You know, because some of them did play against the Sharks, but not enough of them. But you know, if you're worried about them being undercooked, why not do that? Um, so for me, you know, it was it, it was something that was controllable. I think from an Irish rugby point of view, and I wasn't controlled very well, which is, for me, is disappointing. But then the other thing as well is, well, there's a couple of things. First, let's address Ty Byrne, because he obviously got a red card. You know, initial yellow card, then a 20-minute red card against New Zealand. That has been rescinded, which it absolutely should have been. Um, Again, I'm not going to talk about the referee's performance. There's been plenty on that. So if that's what you're interested in, you know, other people will talk about that enough. And you know, I'm sure you've heard it a million times from other people as well on stuff like that. So I'm not going to dwell on that. But I'm glad that his red card got rescinded, um, and he's available for this. But the other thing is, he's available for this, and he probably will play. And for me, looking at the fixtures, I would have thought, okay, you know, the best 23, as it were, the best 23 available will probably play in, you know, opener against New Zealand, and the finisher against South Africa. That's, you know, I think goes without saying that your best players have to play those games. And then in between, then we have this game and the Australia game. So you would look at that and think, okay, well, Japan aren't as good as they used to be. Australia are an improving team, despite what happened to the last week. They still could certainly, you know, knock us, like, you know, take us out, as it were, or beat us in the third week. So then you're thinking, right, so those players who probably aren't going to see any other game time for the rest of the window should play against Japan. But now you have, I think you have the situation of, are they now going to pick a lot of those players that played last week because they need more game time, and therefore players who are in the squad, who, you know, the likes of, let's say, Farrell, who got a call up there, you know, and a few others, the likes of like Keane Prendergast, or those kind of guys, you know, the next, not necessarily the next generation, because like Farrell's 32 and Prendergast has been around a long time, but the next layer of players, you know, who are the guys that every bloody World Cup we get to a quarter final, and players in that bracket have to step in against New Zealand or South Africa or in England or whoever, right? And they don't have the experience at that level, and they're not able to deliver. And then for some reason we can never figure out why we don't deliver in quarterfinals when that type of thing happens every single World Cup. Um, but my worry is, are those players going to see game time now, or as much game time as they should, um, given the performance against New Zealand, especially the last 20 minutes, which would tell you that there's not enough rugby in those guys' legs, that they couldn't sustain it that long. And the fact that there's a lot of stuff to be fixed from the New Zealand game, like they're not gonna fix the attack. In terms of the attack needs an absolute overhaul, and that's going to take more than just the week, especially traveling back from Chicago as well. But that week they're not going to innovate a completely different attack, so that's not going to get sorted. At least, like, they might look better, certainly, just because they're against, like, opposition that isn't at the level of the All Blacks, but that's not going to get fixed. Defense will probably look better as well, although we're still going to get caught out, especially out in the wide channels, because generally our defense out there is pretty poor. And so the things that you're probably going to look at to at least look some way fixed is, one, the scrum, because we struggled badly in the scrum, and then two is the line out. Like, the line out has to be far more accurate than it was against New Zealand. And yes, we disrupted their line out as well, but we had basically zero platform in that game because both scrum and line out were poor. So, you know, given all of that, you're probably thinking, well, a lot of the players who played against New Zealand are probably going to play in this game. And then players who should be getting game time, we already thought, well, most of us thought, like with the squad, that it was very conservative in terms of trying to bring new players through. And now, potentially, we're not going to see even the ones, that are in the squad that don't have that many caps, not necessarily getting starts in this game. They might come off the bench. But yeah, we're not going to see the turnover that maybe we would have seen had the game been closer against New Zealand, or if we'd actually won the game against New Zealand. I think you would have seen a very different Irish team. But I'm expecting this one to be fairly similar in terms of, we looked at the starting 15, injuries aside. You would think that of those 15, maybe like 12 or so will be in the matchday squad for Japan. Now, I hope I'm wrong. But I would be hoping that we would see maybe 6 of them in the matchday squad against Japan, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's going to be, it's going to be somewhere up there around about 12, I think. You might see maybe like Robbie Henshaw will come in, so you'll see either maybe Ringrose or you might even see McCluskey dropping out of the 23, which will be, again, a step back because he's one of the ones we wanted to see have more game time. But yeah, it's going to be a different team there. Then Japan, last week against South Africa, beating 61-7, just, beating out the gate at Wembley. And that's the kind of level they're at, when one of the top tier teams, and South Africa, obviously the best team in the world, when they hit their straps against them, they can put a lot of points on them. I don't expect Ireland to do that. I expect it's going to be one of these games where maybe like Ireland get a little bit of a lead up to about half time. Japan come back a little bit, get to within a couple of scores maybe, and then Ireland pull away to the point where they've won the game, and then maybe Japan get a try or two towards the end, and it ends up maybe being somewhere maybe 15-point margin, something like that, maybe 20 points if Ireland go well. But it's not going to be like 54 points the way South Africa did. It's hard to see that from Ireland at the minute. It's going to be closer, but I do expect an Ireland win. From Japan's point of view, obviously, they've got to keep kind of plugging away in these games. And I think, against Ireland, they'll be looking for a performance, and I think they're going to get that performance compared to the way they played against South Africa, and they'll cause us a lot more problems than they did them, and that's going to be something that will g them up. And then the fact that after this, then they're playing Wales next week. That's probably the game that they've targeted, potentially to win, because I think I don't know whether it's the end of their November fixtures, but it's the end of their November fixtures against other tier 1 teams at least. So yeah, that would be the game that they're looking to peak for. So a performance against Ireland, I think, would be acceptable for them. But yeah, first game, predicting an Ireland win. I'm not going to spend as much time on all the other fixtures, but I'm an Ireland fan. Well, I'm Irish, and as I said, I care deeply about Japan as well. So forgive me for spending so much time on them. But on to the next one then. It's Scotland versus New Zealand. It's at Scottish Gash Murrayfield Stadium in Edinburgh. Kickoff is 3:10 on Saturday. So Scotland never beaten New Zealand before. They've had 2 draws before. I think the last one was 25 all back in like 1985, and then before that you have to like a 0-0 draw. I don't know, in the 60s or something. Let me check here. 1964, yeah, 0-0 draw at Murrayfield. So never beaten them before. But the last 3 times they played, 2014, Scotland 16, New Zealand 24, so 8-point gap. Then 2017, Scotland 17, New Zealand 22, so 5-point gap. And last time, November 2022, Scotland 23, New Zealand 31, so 8-point gap again. So round about like the 1 score average over the last 3 times. But then you go back before then, and they're like New Zealand regularly beating them 30-40 points, that kind of thing. So Scotland, they're getting closer, and it's kind of similar to Ireland. Soldier Field last week was the kind of the return there, where Ireland beat New Zealand first, and Ireland had that kind of thing coming up as well. To finally beating them was you would get some games where they were close, and you had a chance to do it, but you weren't quite perfect. And New Zealand, they're able to, they have that experience of being able to pull games out of the fire against opposition like Scotland or like Ireland, who at the time wouldn't have beaten them before or whatever, and they're able to get those wins. Go back to 2013 Ireland, New Zealand, where New Zealand clock in the red, get over for a try, and then come to draw the match, and then pop over the penalty, or sorry, the conversion on the second attempt, because Ireland charged early to win the game then. And it's that kind of thing where when you've never, like same with Ireland, when you've never beaten a team, you can't just, generally you can't just sneak by, because when it's a tight game like that, the team like New Zealand, or if it's the Springboks or whoever, just have that little bit more in their locker to be able to either keep you out or to score when they need to score right in the last minute, or again, as I said, clock in the red. So generally, kind of similar to the way Ireland did at Soldier Field in 2016, you've got to beat them by like a bigger margin. You can't just sneak by. I think that was the difference for Ireland, was that they were able to keep scoring in that game, and that's what Scotland have to do in this one, I think, to beat them. Because you look at the teams, and it's you look at the personnel, and I would still say New Zealand have a better team than Scotland, but the margin between them is not as big as it would have been. Like if you go back to classic New Zealand, like 2015 New Zealand or wherever, where they were head and shoulders above everybody else in the world. Like this New Zealand team is definitely beatable, but it's one of those ones where um, Scotland will have to be at the absolute top of their game. But if New Zealand are at the top of their game as well, New Zealand still win the game. So Scotland are going to have not just have to play their best, but stop New Zealand from playing their best as well. Stop them having that purple patch the way they did against Ireland. 3 tries in about 15 minutes to basically put the game to bed. Scotland have to find a way to stop that from happening. Have to be able to take every single chance pretty much that they make as well. They've got to be braver than Ireland as well. They've got to, when they have penalties, they've got to go to the corner and they've got to go for tries. Even if sometimes you come away with nothing, the tries are the thing that like mentally are going to get you over the line. And then in the second half, then you've got to keep playing. You got to keep playing. You got to keep that scoreboard ticking over. Because if you got like let's say a 10-point lead with 20 minutes to go, and you stop playing, can almost guarantee you're going to lose, and you're probably going to lose by maybe like 10 points the other way. Because New Zealand will get 3 tries or something because you stop playing, you invite them onto you, and the pressure is just too much. So massive opportunity for Scotland, but this New Zealand team, yes, they're not classically amazing, but I say it so often. There are no bad All Blacks teams. They're just not like they're not as good as previous All Black teams, but they're still better than almost any other team in the world. And that's what you're facing there. And New Zealand though as well, they have things to fix from their game against Ireland. Line-out was well disrupted for them. First half dropping balls left, right, and centre. Kind of cleaned it up a little bit in the second half, but even outside of the purple patch, weren't brilliant. Thought the defence, was certainly better than the Irish defence for them, but definitely a lot of work-ons for them that they've been working on this week. But coming off the back of a win and having work-ons is brilliant place for a team to be, and I think a really good preparation for them. Whereas you look at Scotland, they beat the USA 85-0, so scoring more than a point a minute in that game, and they even had a period in the second half where all the subs are made where like they looked a little bit disjointed and then got back in their stride, but still were able to score 85 points. So in terms of confidence, brilliant. Everyone's buzzing because almost all of them got a try, and then discovered some really good new talent at test level. Because McConnell is the one that stood out, but he's been flying in the URC as well. So it's not like he like if you haven't been paying attention to URC, maybe he's just come out of nowhere. But if you have, like, it's no surprise really that he played so well. But at the same time, you got all that confidence. But have they really been tested against USA? I would say no. So are they properly prepared for going up against a team like New Zealand? That's a difficult one. Again, two schools on it. You're either like you're going in and you're battle hardened, or you're going in you're flying with confidence. Which of those is going to be better for you? So. But it's a good opportunity for Scotland. As I said, they've kind of got to be pretty much at their best, cause New Zealand to have a bit of an off day, and they have a chance in the game. But they've got to be hugely brave in terms of decision making and being able to take all of their chances as well. And again, it might only still be enough for another close defeat. But if you keep chipping away and they're eventually gonna get there, because it's a really good Scotland team, and it feels like it's something that is is coming now. Just because you feel like it's coming doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. New Zealand aren't just going to think, oh well, Scotland, they came close to us the last few times, so they deserve to win. Let's just let them win. But they're not going to. Nobody's going to let you win. You've got to take it. You've got to be brave. But New Zealand at the same time, they're already calling this a Grand Slam tour, which for me, I don't know why you call it a Grand Slam tour before you play the games, but I guess that's just the parlance. It's different to here in the Northern Hemisphere where you only talk about something being a potential Grand Slam until someone has actually done it and beaten all of the teams. Then it becomes a Grand Slam. But for them, that's what that's their goal, and to keep that alive, they've got to beat Scotland in this one. Um, and we probably will see some personnel changes from them, but at the same time, the levels, there isn't much difference in levels in a lot of positions at the moment for New Zealand between the first choice and second choice. You look at especially maybe like hooker. Cody Taylor is brilliant, but you've also got other options in there for that. Second row, you've got you've obviously got Barrett in there, who's a big leader, but the guys next to them, Lord, Holland, etc., they can all do a job there. Back row, they've always got plenty of talent running around there, and the backs as well. They've plenty of players that they can kind of shuffle around. Maybe put Damien McKenzie in at 10. He's gonna, he's gonna be hugely up for this game if he gets a start as well. And that's where a lot of their motivation might come from, is guys who didn't start against Ireland getting their chance and knowing they've got to take it as well, because if they don't, they're either going to be stuck on the bench for the rest of the tour, or actually drift out of contention completely because other people have come in and taken their chance as well. So it makes it even more difficult, I think, for Scotland. But in this one, it's kind of I would say, in terms of prediction, I'm predicting an All Blacks win, because I think that that whole history thing of we've never lost to them can be enough to kind of break a team, when it's a close game and then New Zealand pull away, similar to the way they did against Ireland, even though Ireland obviously have beaten them. But if that last week felt like that kind of game to me, where New Zealand just had that extra bit in the tank, and I think they'll have that against Scotland as well. But it's not going to stop me cheering for Scotland, because I'm going to support my Northern Hemisphere teams for the most part this week. But yeah, I do think it's going to be New Zealand winning that one. Okay, on to the next game then. Let me pull it up here. So game 3 then is England versus Fiji, and this one is at the Allianz Stadium, Twickenham. It's a 5:40 kickoff on Saturday, and England started really well last week. Beating Australia fairly comprehensively, 25 points to 7. And of the Northern Hemisphere teams that played last week, England definitely the standout team in terms of it feels like they're taking an extra step over the last year, and they really are evolving their game, and they're becoming something different and something better as well. And they looked at times against Australia, looked really, really good. And I think not a good thing for for Fiji this week, that you got an England, not just an England team, an England squad, I think, that really look like they're firing, they're hitting their straps. And again, the whole thing with Ireland as well. There were plenty of English players on the Lions tour as well, but they were still able to field a team that was able to produce that level of performance that Ireland came nowhere near. Getting to against New Zealand. So it tells you that there is um, you know I think they managed their players better than Ireland did in terms of getting ready for this window. But we look at Fiji, and for them, they're not getting that much in terms of you know games against top teams this time around. Like they've basically got two. I think it's like this week against England, and next week they're playing France, and they may be playing other games, but they're not against tier one teams. So these are the two big games for them. They're playing them like 1 week after the other, and it's going to be a big ask for them. Obviously, there's plenty of skillful players in that team, and they will be able to produce moments in the game. But I think it's going to be a fairly easy win for England in terms of there will be the kind of thing of maybe the bit of back and forth on the scoreboard for a while, but you would expect England eventually 15, 20, maybe 20 odd points winners once they kind of really kick into gear in that second half. So I'm expecting kind of a similar game to Ireland Japan, but I think England margin to Fiji at the moment is probably bigger than Ireland's margin down to Japan. So you'd expect England to be a little bit more comfortable. There will be some uncomfortable periods in the game for them though, because Fiji have the ability to do that. I don't think Fiji have the ability though in an autumn international against an England squad that is beginning to really take off, for them to throw a spanner in the works. There are times when Fiji can get at England, but I don't think this will be one of those occasions. So I'm happy to see Fiji getting some games against tier one teams, but I wish it was more. And the fact that this new competition is coming in next year, which will mean that certain teams from tier two aren't going to see as much tier one action, really is sad. But hopefully Fiji can do themselves proud at least in the game. But I'm expecting an England win in that one. Okay, on to the next one then. It is Italy versus Australia. This one is at the Blue Energy Stadium in Udine, and is a 5:40 kickoff here in Ireland, 6:40 local time. So then obviously check your own local times as well for the game. So in this game we're talking about Italy, who they've beaten Australia once, and that one time I think pretty sure is the last time these two teams played back in 2022, and it was a 28-27 win for Italy. So I don't think at the moment Italy are up to the same level as back then, and Australia I think have probably improved since then as well. But there's still that kind of overlap there where Italy on a good day can definitely beat Australia on a bad day, and there's it doesn't have to be like Italy's absolute best and Australia's absolute worst performance for Italy to win. There's enough of an overlap there, but you would expect that if Australia do produce a performance, that they would win the game. They still definitely have the edge over Italy in terms of where their ceiling is as a squad compared to this Italy squad. But at home, it's going to give Italy a bit of an edge in that one. And as I said last time out, they beat them, but we're going back 3 years. And actually this week, a lot of fixtures like Scotland the same. The the last time they played each other was 2022 in the November. So a lot of these kind of go back to then, or back to the last World Cup or wherever, and I think Italy, they this kind of last few years they've been I think more inconsistent than we've seen them. They had kind of had a period where they looked like they were steadily getting better and better. Then they had a period where they were terrible, and then now they've had a period where they've been good and then bad, and kind of there are times when you wonder, they make some progress. Like before the last World Cup, they made a lot of progress, and you're thinking, oh, they're doing brilliantly, and beating Australia in that November was part of that progress. Then they go to 2023 World Cup, absolutely abject, get absolutely destroyed in the pools, especially by New Zealand, and look like they gave up in that game. And for me, they haven't really quite recovered since then. The fact that Wales fell off a cliff means that the talk of them getting kicked out of the Six Nations has kind of gone away, because they haven't been wooden spooners. But at the same time, you feel like they haven't made as much progress as we would have liked, especially when you look at the way Benetton had been performing, and now that Zebre are improving as well. They can see that there's a good basis there. You look at their under 21s as well. They're doing well. They're under 21s are basically pretty much regularly beating everyone except for maybe England and France are under 21s. They're beating all the other nations, including Ireland, at that level on a regular basis. And you look at that and think there's definitely a much stronger foundation there than there was previously. But you're also wondering whether it's, this is kind of the almost a torchbearer generation, and it's going to be the next generation that comes after these guys that are the ones who are going to go on and do those kind of more special things. These guys have done some special things, like beating Australia for the very first time. But maybe it's going to be a younger generation who are going to kind of take them on to the next level rather than these guys. But for now, they're playing Australia. They've got a decent chance to win, but you also have to look at Australia. They've been fairly decent this year, like good against the Lions. The rugby championship, they did well at times in that, but kind of up and down a bit in that too, but certainly improved compared to other years and more competitive. But then you look at the performance against England last week, and didn't really throw a punch against England. Like the only try they got was a turnover, intercept turnover, where if England had been smarter, they probably would have got in for a try before that even occurred. So it didn't really offer much in attack, and kind of struggling in set piece as well. So a lot for them to work on, but you expect them to be much improved in this one, and maybe that's going to be kind of the downfall for Italy, that Australia will have really worked hard during the week, made those improvements, will be looking to show that they have improved in this game, and I think that's going to be what takes Australia to the win in the end. Is that because I think there would have been, if they had beaten England, I think Italy certainly would have preferred Australia to have won that game against England, because then they come into this game and they're thinking, okay, well, we've just beaten England, we've got Ireland the week after, so maybe they're not as focused on this game, take their eye off it a little bit, and it gives Italy that little chance. but now they're going to be absolutely laser focused on this. And yes, the professionals that are supposed to be focused, always talking about the next opposition, but they're human, and people do that, right? They're they know this week is Italy, but they're also got one eye on, well, next week is Ireland, especially if they'd won that first game, I think. But now it'll be absolutely drilled into them. And I think because of that, it's going to be an Australia win. Again, going to be cheering for Italy. But I think Australia are going to win that game. Okay, on to the next game then, and it's France versus South Africa. This is at the Stade de France in Paris, and kickoff is 8:10 p.m. on Saturday and 9:10 local time. So this one repeat of the World Cup quarter final, in Saint Denis, in the Stade de France, back in 2023. France 28, South Africa 29, and South Africa, going quarter final won by a point, semi final won by a point, final won by a point. Absolute efficiency and what you expect from not just the best team in the world, the best coach team in the world, and I think the best prepared team in the world as well. And for me, certainly at test level, the most innovative team in the world. Just so many, they change. They don't just change the game; they actually force the change of the rules as well. With how innovative they are, and this is going to be kind of. And then you've got also the Dupont rule as well. So France doing a little bit there. Obviously, no Dupont for this one, but for me, two very exciting rugby nations going head to head. And it's been, you look over kind of the history of the last four meetings. So that World Cup one, then before that, then they played in Marseille in again November 2022, and France winning by 4 points. Then you go back 4 years before that, 2018, Stade de France again, South Africa winning by 3 points on that one, 26-29. So very similar score to that semi-final. And then you go back the year before, again in Stade de France, France 17, South Africa 18. Then when you go back before that, the summer tour, France went to South Africa and beaten comprehensively in all three games, 37-14, 37-15, 35-12. And that's the thing, right? South Africa at home, very different beast, but it's shown as well, though, winning a lot of those close games over the last four in Paris, that they have that ability to perform on the road as well. There's a lot of teams where there's a big drop off between home and away performance, but South Africa can give anyone a game any day, anywhere in the world, really. They're just such a good, rugby nation, and they've got a massive amount of depth. We're seeing from France now, them showing their depth as well, bringing in a lot of young players for this window and trying to increase that depth, going into the next World Cup in Australia. But South Africa, we had, Razi talking about the fact that he wants to have like the best two 23-man squads in the world. That's what he's trying to build. So you can see the kind of depth that they have at the disposal to even have that ambition in the first place. And you look at the quality of the players that they have as well. It's I think in terms of just talent and layers of depth, you can see why these are two of the best teams in the world. Like you look like at my own team, Ireland, much smaller pool of players, trying to do the best what we have means that coaching has to be right up there and things have to go our way. Whereas South Africa, brilliantly coached as well, which is why it makes them such a scary team, but a massive mountain of depth as well. And France, trying to build that kind of level themselves, and this is obviously the game of the weekend between these two, and it's gonna be probably another titanic clash. And I was talking about earlier about I'm supporting mostly the Northern Hemisphere teams this weekend, but this is one where I'm not actually supporting the Northern Hemisphere team because South Africa, they're a URC nation, and I've got more like I don't watch top 14. Obviously, I know other players from Champions Cup and Six Nations and stuff, but I feel more of an affinity to the South African players and the South African teams that play in the URC, and because of that, I'm like I want to see them doing well. I want to see everyone URC doing well. So I'm actually going to be supporting South Africa this weekend, and that's who I'm predicting is going to win this one as well. But I think it's going to be pretty close. Be the it's the most anticipated game certainly of the weekend, but I think it's probably going to be the best game of the weekend as well. Okay, so those are the Saturday games. We've got one game then on the Sunday, Wales versus Argentina at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. Kickoff at 3:10 p.m. Okay, so this one, you look at Wales, who had that long losing streak, record losing streak, finally broke it against Japan on the summer tour, and they're looking now to basically hit that reset button, I think, and start building a bit more at home. And they'd love to kick that off with a win against Argentina. Then you got Argentina, who at times in the Rugby Championship showed that they could stand toe to toe with any other team in there, but also can be vulnerable in terms of if they get caught cold, can shift a lot of points as well. So kind of an up and down Rugby Championship for them, but it's got to be really good prep for them to have to go in against two of the best teams in the world and improving Australia as well. Really will have kind of gotten them ready for this game against Wales. So if Wales don't hit the ground running, they could find themselves really in trouble, early on in that game, and having to try and dig themselves out of a hole. And given how fragile they've been, heads definitely could go down if that was to pass. If Argentina got a bit of a lead, you might see it as one of those games where Argentina maybe go out to, let's say, a 20-point lead or so. Then Wales have a bit of a rally, Argentina pull away again, and that's the way that this game certainly could go. Obviously, Wales are hoping that it's not how it goes, but you've got to think about it. Like, you go back to last time these two teams met was at the last World Cup in France 2023, and it was a quarter final, Wales 17, Argentina 29. So Argentina taking the win there fairly comfortably. And you have to go back to the November before that, for when Wales won, and that was 20 points to 13 in the Millennium Stadium. But then the time before that they played the year before, it was actually in the July, where Argentina won 33 points to 11, and then I think the week before they drew 20 points all. But Argentina, this stadium isn't a place that they're particularly afraid to go and play. So, it's not going to have a massive fear factor for them. Obviously, going to be a big G up for Wales. So, always like playing in your home stadium is going to give you that. But I think it's one of these games where I feel like Wales have to get it, either have a decent start, or at least if the momentum is going with Argentina, that they don't concede too much early on. Might concede an early like try, or like maybe even 12, let's say 12 points to nil. But if they can then kind of start digging into the game, there's a way back for them. But I think if it's like 20 odd points or something, to 5 or wherever, it's probably going to be a bit too far for them. So, but it's going to be an interesting kind of end to the weekend. It's good as well, actually, to see that one of the games is actually being played on the Sunday, rather than like the Saturday's chocolate block. Last week we had the Saturday chocolate block as well. You know, and it means that you get things like, this weekend England and Fiji and Italy, Australia are kicking off at the same time, so you have to choose which game you want to watch. So I don't understand why, if all of those games can't be played, with the view that someone could watch all of the games live, then why isn't one of those games on Sunday? So you have 4 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. For me, it makes sense, but I guess broadcasters decide, they've paid the money for the thing, and they decide, well, no, I want that game on the Saturday at this time. It's when I'm going to get the most views on it, or compared to whatever else I have, like, because I want this other game at this other time, etc. Right? But still, just from the point of view of fans, why not have another game on the Sunday instead of 5 games on the Saturday and just 1 on the Sunday? But this game, Wales versus Argentina, as I said, it's going to be a tough day for Wales. I'm definitely supporting them. Again, URC Nation, and going to give them all the support there. But you look at these two teams and you think, over the last year or so, Argentina undoubtedly have been the better of these two teams, and for probably a longer period than that, certainly going back to that last World Cup and maybe before as well. So big task for Wales. I'd love them to win, but I think Argentina might take this one out, because again, I can see that kind of scenario of, if Argentina get a bit of a lead, I do think Wales could maybe come back closer to them, but not necessarily back over the top of them. Whereas I think Argentina, if they go a bit behind, but then they start getting momentum, that fragility with the Welsh team that's been there over the last while, if that kicks in, it allows them, I think, to come back from further behind than maybe Wales can against them. So I'm cheering for Wales, but I'm going to go for an Argentina win in that one. Okay, so that is the end of this one. Let me know what how your team is going, how you think the fixtures are going to go this weekend, all that kind of stuff. Put it down in the comments.